Yeah. Oh, appreciate it.
It was fun.
Almost.
I get it.
Trouble I'm getting.
You got,
into.
no, you're not, I'm sure you're not getting, well, you've also got a lot.
Janie, have we heard from Nick?
To brushing.
Sorry.
It's been.
Have we heard from Nick?
And a little over 2 years ago. Maryland, but it's public record. It's a trail. I'm supposed to be any of those things. 5% difference. That's enough.
Well, it's the appointed hour. It's 7 o'clock. So good evening, council, staff, all members of the public in attendance for the August 15th, 2024 meeting of Lexington City Council. The 15th, the meeting that was not supposed to be, but then it was. So here we are. So before calling the meeting to order, I want to call attention to item number 8 on the agenda regarding citizen remarks and comments, to provide instructions for that now, to provide anyone time to plan and prepare if necessary, if you want to speak with council at that time. So if you do plan to speak this evening, we invite you to sign up, which is the sign up sheet over there on the table. And we will recognize you during the citizens remarks section on the agenda, which again is number 8. We ask that you stand at the podium, and for the record, please state your name and if you are a resident of Lexington, Virginia. If you want to be contacted by staff or council members, please provide your contact information to our clerk, Janie Hostetter. And we ask that all folks, when they do speak, make your comments to council as a whole, as this is your opportunity to speak to us. It's not a time for debate, but be brief, state your position, and provide facts, provide written statements or your supporting materials to the clerk for distribution to the council and city manager. Again, debate is prohibited, and we ask that you speak clearly as we want to hear what you have to say, and council wants to hear from all who wish to speak. The subject and discussion will be limited to 3 minutes per individual. Time cannot be transferred to another speaker. And if you represent a group, you may wish to identify the other members of your group who are in attendance, but you're limited as a representative of the group to 5 minutes. And may I remind us all that our meetings of the Lexington City Council are formal proceedings and are all recorded. And with that being said, it's time for the rest of our meeting to get started off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I call this meeting to order and with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you very much. Nick is here. Thank you so much for being here.
Sorry, wait.
All right, that happens.
West.
So next on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any requests to add or move anything around on the agenda this evening? Being none, I'll approve the agenda as presented. There are no proclamations this evening. There are no presentations, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a public hearing. Now, City Council met in a work session on this topic recently, but first we should hear from Arnie Glazer, our city planner, on this topic. Thank you, sir.
Good evening to you all. These are annual zoning text amendments, and there are 17 of them proposed for your consideration. Staff committed to an annual review of the zoning ordinance in order to avoid that massive overhaul that we had to do in 2017. So this is part of those annual updates. The amendments are derived from observations and suggestions that have come from staff, from planning commission, from city council, primarily at public hearings, but also in other ways, and also by the public during those meetings. Planning Commission reviewed and amended the proposed language over 4 meetings and held a public hearing on March 28th. And following that public hearing, there was a unanimous recommendation for approval for the items that you have in front of you today. There was a work session that was just mentioned held by City Council on the 18th, where all of those amendments were reviewed and council then directed staff to advertise the public hearing that we're having this evening. And that also included that some slight tweak or amendment for food trucks to allow those also to be considered in Richardson Park. And that was included in the advertisements for this meeting this evening. Your packet contains a staff report for all 17 of the proposed amendments, as well as the ordinance for adoption. And if approved, sort of a follow-up item, if approved, you could also direct staff to begin a zoning map amendment, so a rezoning and a conditional use permit for the 3 parcels that the city owns that were somewhat recently added to the cemeteries, if that particular cemetery amendment gets approved with the other 17. That's all I have for a presentation. I can make myself available for questions. I could also go through each of these line by line, all 30 pages if you like.
So I,
Do you have questions?
yeah, I had one opening question. Were we gonna have a separate work session on the that parcel that you were just mentioning? And this I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of
I'm not recalling any other.
You're thinking about Maple Lane?
yeah, I'm thinking about Maple
Yeah.
Lane.
Oh, yeah.
That's you weren't referring to that in here. Okay.
And just to clarify that, we're thinking about having that on your agenda in after the first of the year to get through these and some other projects that Arnie has, but that's where we slotted that. So we haven't lost track of that.
Thanks.
Did you get any comments or questions from anyone in the public?
2 inquiries about townhouses in particular as they relate to one particular open space in a block that's between Jefferson and Jackson, and is that north of White Street? There's a larger open parcel back there. Actually, it's a couple or 3 parcels that make that up. That's R1 zoning. So this, even if we had made the amendment for townhouses that would not require them to be on a public street, townhouses are not allowed by right or conditional in the R1 zoning district. That entire block is R1. So we had 2 inquiries mainly related to townhouses.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for council?
Other than the food truck Richardson Park update, is there any other updates from the work session that were made that you could think of?
No, I don't think there were any outstanding questions for staff to chase down, so we don't have anything additional for you. And on the Richardson Park, I believe that I've seen a little bit of discussion on Facebook, and it seems as though most of that was positive.
All of it.
All of it was positive. So that's the only other additional item to mention.
Thank you.
Do you want the numbers from that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see.
And I did hand out flyers to the adjacent properties too, and spoke with 2 of the neighbors who happened to be out, and one was very in favor of it. The other didn't say, but didn't seem against it. So if nobody contacted you, I take that as a positive sign as well.
Yeah, there were 22 people who responded like or love the idea, and just as many of the people that made comments about it, because I asked people to say yay or nay about it. A lot of them said yay, and the others had comments about saying, you know, awesome and great idea, love it, those kinds of things. So nothing negative at all.
That's good.
Any other questions before we open the public hearing? Oh, thank you, Arnie. Now, you've heard a presentation and a little bit of discussion with council about this topic. So we're going to open the public hearing in regard to the zoning ordinance amendment of 2024-01. The public hearing is now open. Are there any members of the public who wish to come up and talk to us? So if you could just state your name and whether you live in the city of
Yes,
Lexington or not.
good evening. My name is Michael Perry and I live on Jefferson Street. And as Arnie mentioned, he did receive a phone call from me about that parcel of land that is directly behind my house and adjacent to a number of other properties on White Street and Jackson Street and Jefferson Street. It's always been my understanding that landlocked lots, such as those 3 parcels are, always have required a public access a street to be able to be built on. And Arnie explained to me that because it's zoned R1, that townhouses could never be built back there. But I am still concerned that townhouse developments could be built on private lanes. I think it's important that the streetscape of the city be maintained, and that it would be short-sighted to allow that change of the rule to allow private roads to be built or private drives to access townhouse developments, because I'm concerned about the streetscape. I'm also concerned about access for emergency vehicles, and all of those things that go with townhouse developments. And I think that it would behoove council to maybe have further discussion about this topic rather than just approving it outright. And also, I'm also concerned that if you do approve this exception and allow the rule to be changed, that who's to say that the zoning on that parcel or other similar parcels in the city couldn't just be changed, and all of a sudden that rule would be applicable and would not be a requirement any longer. So I think it's important that you consider thinking about that further and having more discussion and study about it, because I think the ramifications are more significant than just possibly one parcel. I'm not sure if this change is being requested for one particular project or not, but I think it should be looked at on a more holistic overall view of the future of the city and what kind of developments we're going to allow and what kind of access those areas should have.
Thank you. Arnie, do you have any comments in regard to that?
Only to say that this wasn't because of a proposed project, other than the way this came about was simply because of an observation that I had with the actually proposed project that didn't come to fruition, in the sense that when we had the Spotswood and the Spotswood Collaborative, one of their three designs, because I think they had three different ones, one of them was townhouses, and they could not have built the townhouses as proposed because they did not have a street wide enough that would meet 50-foot right away, 30-foot pavement width, which is because we go by VDOT standards. And if you had a 2.3 acre parcel, which is what Spotswood is, and you ate up that much of it for just the roadway to access townhouses, that would really eat up a lot of that property. So that's where this really came from, is an observation of mine during the Spotswood particular proposals that had come in. So it's not because somebody wants to build townhouses anywhere else in the city. So that's how it just came about.
Just use that as an example of future possibilities for people interested in doing something.
And then it may also be helpful as we try to unlock the harder parcels to access, which is counter to what you just heard. But if we have parcels that are particularly harder to access, as we have only pockets of a few parcels here and there, that road requirement of 50 feet in right of way and 30 feet in pavement is just incredibly difficult. So this just allows that a developer to come forward potentially with something other than 30 feet of pavement and 50 feet of right of way.
So
All the development standards still are in place. So it's not as, I just don't expect a lot of townhouse development just to come about just because we are deleting the requirement to be on a public street.
all right, thank you. Let me see if there are others who are willing to come forward. Is there anyone else here to speak about the zoning?
Hi, I'm Tom Contos from 301 McLaughlin Street in Lexington. I don't think any of these things are particularly a problem, but I do want to point out in regard to what the gentleman just said, it might be a good idea to go back to the planning commission and make sure you've coordinated the lot width requirements with this change, because I think what I understand is that you're changing the requirement for the units to front on street frontage, but not changing the requirement for how much street frontage is required for a given number of units. So currently, I think you've got a formula-based thing where you get 20 feet of width essentially for each townhouse. And so if you're building 10 townhouses, you still need 200 feet of sort of street frontage. So if you're thinking that this is going to allow maybe to use parcels in a more efficient way, I'm not sure that it's achieved unless you've also revisited that issue of lot width. And I just wanted to mention that as something that planning commission might want to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Contos. Good to see you. Anyone else regarding the zoning amendment? Okay. It is 7:15 and we will close the public hearing so that we can have council's consideration of the matter and start out with any discussion you might want to have.
I do have a question for Arnie, because in planning commission, we did talk about townhouses and looking at, like, for instance, Weatherburn is the same situation. That was a PUD, but that's a private road running through it. So first of all, like you said, townhomes are not allowed in R1 and R2, and they're by right in the multifamily in RLC and C1. And then conditional in C2. As far as that frontage requirement, that sounds like a good point. Is that conflicting or?
I don't think it is. And what we were trying to simply accomplish is allowing somebody that not to have to hold to the lot width. And it was only addressing that specific thing. I will say that all of those 4 or 5 criteria that we have using design standards for townhouses, we could probably go through those a lot more thoroughly to truly understand what that would allow as far as a townhouse development. Those are very basic standards. So this was just a quick fix for something that I noticed. But if we really expect, and we may have that opportunity here in the near future anyway, to more thoroughly go through the townhouse standards beyond just the 4 that we have, to have a better understanding of what they could potentially, what could be developed under them. I'll just say it that way.
Right.
That makes sense.
No, that does make sense. And since they're by right, we wouldn't get a site plan for them ahead of time, or how?
You would get a site plan, but not, the use would be allowed,
Yeah.
but then the site plan would come in, because the only things that are exempted from site plan requirements is a 1-family or 2-family dwelling.
Okay.
So townhouse obviously a multifamily, so that would require the site plan approval process.
And now it would still go through the emergency folks to look at it to see if they have appropriate access.
Then there would be that sort of a negotiation. We have had instances where that private drive, I'm going to use Weatherburn as an example, that didn't go over terribly well
Right.
with emergency folks, because it was intended to be 1 way, then they were using it as 2-way, and then they weren't policing on a private drive that you can't park on, you shouldn't be able to park on either side. So that did create issues, but at least it gives us a little bit of flexibility and the fire and emergency folks to say yes or no on something that's less than 30 feet in width in pavement and 50 feet in right of way,
Yeah.
which I just think is truly excessive given our development pattern.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's all good points. And I'm not opposed to them being on private streets. Like we saw, like you said, that design had that, but I also like the idea of maybe holding off on this and looking at the whole townhomes more carefully to make sure that we can.
This isn't a package deal. You can certainly jettison the 1 and then push that to a later discussion if you want to look at townhomes more holistically, and then just perhaps address the other 16 this evening. You certainly have that ability.
Okay. Okay.
And when we're talking about townhomes, I mean, townhomes such as General's Retreat are by right because that's multifamily, but they wouldn't be fronting on a public street. There's 48, I believe, at General's Retreat, and I mean, they don't front on a public street.
Currently.
Currently.
Sorry, I'm thinking in the approved.
Well,
Okay, yeah,
be-
you're correct. Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, that's another situation where we would want the opportunity for them to not front on a public street. They don't currently front, not all of them, sort of none of them, except maybe the
And
west,
it-
the furthest west. But that's just another situation where there is a townhome community in Lexington already that doesn't front on a public street.
doesn't create an issue.
Are there other townhomes that don't front on a public street that you know of?
We have so few townhomes. There are a few on Myers Street that front on a public street. There are a few out Lexington Avenue, out Thornhill that front on whatever, I guess that's Lexington Avenue on that. So those front on the street. So I can't think of any others immediately.
This Mountain View Terrace is not fronting on it, but it's
Easily
beside.
accessed by. Good example.
But those are other, that's a great example. Another part of the city where again, those are townhomes that don't front, whether on a public street.
Well,
So I mean,
the multifamily,
But-
doesn't it have different standards? I mean, if it's done in the RM zone,
Standards in,
for frontage and all that, it's not like every unit has to has to be on a road,
correct,
yeah.
not in multifamily, certainly not.
right? Okay.
but it's just what I'm saying is efficient use of space.
And the streets, they are not public streets, they're privately part
Arnie,
of the property.
is there a difference between a duplex, a condo, and a townhouse?
We do have definitions
Okay.
for at least
I'll
two
look
of
it
those
up.
things. In the sense that a duplex is pretty much standard of what you think, two equally sized things share a wall. Townhouse has that's different definition, and then condominium, I'm not even sure that we have in, because we typically don't deal with ownership
Okay,
in the zoning ordinance
okay.
Aren't duplexes allowed in like R1?
R1
Yeah,
by right.
all right.
And so you could, I mean, a duplex is two connected, sharing a wall. Townhouse, a set of two townhouses look like a duplex to some people, right? That share a wall.
Yes, but I think townhouse has a definition of three or more.
Okay,
Yeah,
Just to
all right.
make that distinction, if I remember correctly, I can
Got it.
pull it up, but
No,
I'm
that's
pretty
fine.
sure it
That's all.
starts at
Packet.
three, just to make. it-
That's good. Thank you.
I believe there's an example of a duplex on McCorkle.
We definitely have a
We
few
have a few
duplexes
duplexes,
around
yes.
town.
We have a lot.
Before Arnie has to jump up and down, if we have questions. Are there any other things that we need to talk to Arnie about before we move forward?
I would think a question, maybe more of an observation. Mention was made about emergency access at Weatherford. And do we have any information for answering that question, emergency access question for this proposed lot that is on the table now?
I'm not sure I'm following your questions.
Yeah, it's a landlocked piece of property now that you're talking about allowing building on a private road.
Building.
You can't put a townhouse on that piece of property. It's an R1.
Right, but what I'm thinking about is there's discussion going on now in the planning commission about cottage housing.
Oh, yeah.
And cottage housing is not a townhouse, but it's
Right.
more than one.
And there's a whole section we'll have or at least discuss about access for emergency vehicles.
Right,
That is-
and that's what I'm getting at in there. And so there's a possibility that could be discussed as well as a potential use for the property. I would be in support of delaying approval on this particular one for tonight until we have more discussion.
You mean until the planning commission a few months from now or 6 months from now is finished with their unrelated topic of cottage housing?
Yes.
There's no particular push for townhouses. It was just an observation. So time wise, it could be whenever.
So there's no one that, I was looking to build on a private lot essentially, or a private, okay.
Not currently.
So before you have a seat, Arnie, I wanted to mention something about the electric vehicle charging stations. And what I want to, mention may not have anything to do with the ordinance, but when you have people that come before you in regard to adding them, there have been a lot of discussions in the news about how electric charging stations are somewhat considered an afterthought about where to put them. And they're being placed in places that are unsafe, like behind buildings in the dark and back out of the way. And people feel that when they're sitting there while their vehicle is being charged and they're there by themselves, it's dark, 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a real issue in some parts of the country. So I hope that that's something that we can consider as you have discussions with businesses.
A point taken. In this case, we were just doing a stopgap measure. We understand that there's a lot more that needs to be vetted for all of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure that comes along. But currently we didn't allow it. So we at least wanted to put something in the code that says if I, in my yard, or if the city ever gets to allowing them on the street, that they are in a parking space that's on street, at least it's allowed. But yeah, I agree that we would still need to develop more standards for them eventually.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any more questions for Arnie? I think it's safe to say that. Okay. Council, what's your pleasure? I think we already talked about removing one of the items from making the decision. So what's your pleasure?
I hope, first of all, that some entrepreneurs have been listening and bring the food trucks out to Jordan's Point and Richardson Park and Brubaker Park, because it sounds like people are excited about them. But yes, I move to approve ordinance 2024-06 with zoning ordinance amendment. Oh, I had it written.
Number
Is it
9.
2024-01? Except for item 9 on it, and I'm not sure how that's listed in the zoning.
Allow
Sorry.
townhouses along a private drive.
Yeah, on the ordinance, but eliminate item 9 regarding the townhouses.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Okay. This requires a call vote since there's no further discussion. Ms. Strawn,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Sigler.
Aye.
Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
And then I'll go
Yeah.
ahead and make the motion that Arnie requested about the zoning map amendments related to the 3 parcels that are contingent to the cemeteries that the city recently acquired.
Nuance of the Virginia code actually requires that to be done by resolution from the governing body. So if you would move to adopt a resolution to do. that.
Absolutely. I move to adopt a resolution that we direct Arnie to work on the zoning maps amendment dealing with those 3 parcels.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Mr. Alligood. Any further discussion? Being none, it's roll call vote required. Ms. Strong,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
No,
Aye.
Sigler, Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Alligood.
Aye.
And I vote aye, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Arnie, you have your necessary items in order. And thank you all for coming to the public hearing. Much appreciated. Okay, so in your packet, you have the following minutes for July 18th, work session, July 18th, a regular meeting, August 1st, city council work session. Janie, did we get another one?
No, the one I sent you all was the August search work
1st.
session.
Thank you so much. Are there any changes, corrections, observations, comments about the minutes?
I just had one small observation change. My name appears twice at the very bottom of the most recent ones that were sent out.
August 1st.
Yeah.
All right. That's something that can easily be corrected. And we want to thank Janie for all the fine work that she does. So I would think that we can go ahead and approve the minutes as presented, except for the typo that was noted by Mr. Betts. Thank you. So we are now at number 8. Are there any citizens to come before council this evening? Anyone wishing to speak to us? We don't have anyone on the list. Anyone that didn't get on the list wish to speak? Okay, being none, we'll continue moving on. We might make a record tonight. We have the consent agenda. We have a pretty busy time ahead of us with all the items that are listed. So council need to know what your pleasure is on these items on the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. There's no discussion required. It does require a roll call vote. Mr. Alligood,
Aye.
Mr. Betts.
Aye.
Mr. Sigler.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Ms. Strong.
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And I don't know about some of you, but I find it pretty helpful to jot these dates down on my calendar because we get the first dibs at finding out what they're all about. Okay, we don't have any unfinished business that I know of, not been made aware of, so I think we can move on to reports and communications. And we'll start with Blue Ridge Resource Authority. Mr. Smith.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Main Street, Lexington.
Main Street Board met for annual retreat last week. It was very productive. We set some goals for ourselves in regards to better contact with businesses, fundraising to relieve some of the pressure of city contribution and increasing visitor numbers. It was well attended, a lot of good energy, I think, in the room when we finished up. So I would call it productive and progressive.
Good.
Thank you.
That's encouraging. Thank you so much. Maury Service Authority, Mr. Alligood.
No report.
Thank you. Planning Commission, Ms. Strong.
Planning Commission met last Thursday, August 8th, and we had an application for a certificate of appropriateness for signage at Taqueria Jalisco, and that was approved unanimously. Then we continued our discussion of our cottage housing. We also welcomed Krista Anderson to the Planning Commission, and we do still have one position open. That's all I have.
Thank you. And Mr. Betts, do you have a regional
do.
tourism board?
The current tourism lease expires February 28th, 2025. We established a lease negotiation committee, and I was asked to be a member of this committee. Regional Tourism Sponsorship Award Round 7, which is covers the period between July 1st, 2024 and December 31st, 2024. The awards were 22nd Annual Nothing Fancy Bluegrass Festival, $1,500, Balloons Over Rockbridge, $1,500, FOCT 2024 Chesapeake Trail Marathon, Half Marathon, 10K, 5K, and 26.2 relay, 1,500, Lion Kiln 2024 Summer Concert Series, 1,000, MSBV Mountain Day, 1,000, Chamber of Commerce Rockbridge Beer and Wine Festival, 1,000, FONBSP Luminary Nights, 750, Boxerwood Education Association Music in Garden, 750, Rockbridge Creative Institute Halloween Full Moon Mountain Day or Mountain Run 5K, 10K, 750, and Rotary Community 4th of July Celebration 250. So these were the awards in round 7. There'll be another round, coming up. We do it twice a year. I guess actually it'll be next year in 2025 will be the next round. So January 1st, 2025 to the summer. So we usually do a beginning of the year to the summer and then a summer to the end of the year sponsorship twice a year.
It's great that tourism does that. It provides a lot of resource for some of the organizations that struggle.
And there has been some discussion of, maybe trying to expand the funding because it is getting more popular. More places are applying. So it is tough because we'll get a lot of good applications in that we want to fund more than we do. So that's something that's being talked about, is expanding the funding.
Any council members have questions? And I don't do this often enough to ask after every person has spoken if you have questions, so please feel free. No? Okay. Mr. Siegler, Raro.
The Raro Board of Directors met last Wednesday. We are about to kick off our fall sports. Our numbers are incredibly strong and they're on the heels of record numbers in the last fiscal year. Of course, it is true that we've had a lot more opportunities for folks to participate in our leagues. And so that's part of why our numbers are up. But pickleball continues to be a huge driver of recreation in our area. And we are going to have open court play and league play this fall. And want to do a special thanks, I'm told, to the Board of Supervisors, the Rockbridge County Public Schools, and Dr. Thompson. Need to thank those three groups and individuals that they are allowing Raro to put lines on the 3 tennis courts at the high school so that they may be used for pickleball. So thank you to the Board of Supervisors, Rockbridge County Public Schools, and Dr. Thompson for that. The Raro staff put the lines down and so on, and we'll get the netting, but we thank them for allowing those courts to be used by the community. Also this fall, we will have kickball, which is really exciting for adults. And we plan to have that kickball take place over at Laurel Park. There's 2 fields at Laurel Park, and that will be a great location for adults to relive elementary school and middle school playing kickball. I always talk about football. I always talk about soccer and cheer. Like I said, those numbers are up, but I want to follow up on one thing about the hunter safety course that I shared with you before. That course will take place this weekend on the 17th at the BV Fire Department. And we now have 37 people registered for that course. And that is a combination of youth and adults. Because you might have an adult bringing their child for that course. And that will be an in-person course through the Department of, through the state, essentially. And if it was not there, if it was not in person, done by Chad Coffey and representatives from the state, it would essentially be done online. And so I think that we, as a community, like I've said before, are safer that we've got 37 hunters doing it in person with trained instructors instead of sitting in front of a computer for their hunter safety course. So again, a big thanks to the Raro staff for taking that on. And then lastly, we've had some staff turnover. Brian Smith, who is an employee of Raro and did a great job. He's now the new PE teacher at Lilburn Downing Middle School. So we had to replace Brian as a program coordinator, and we hired Christine Clancy to be a program coordinator for Raro. And then we also had an opportunity due to staff turnover to hire a facilities supervisor. You may recall we had a facilities supervisor several years ago, and then due to some staffing changes in COVID, we went away from having a full-time supervisor of facilities, but now we just continue to have so many facilities from Rivermont to down to Natural Bridge. We've got, in Glasgow to Buena Vista, we've got a lot of facilities that we help keep an eye on. And we do a lot of work on those facilities. We get a lot of help from Public Works in Lexington and Public Works in Buena Vista. But Robert Snyder will come on staff here in a few days, actually, to help Raro keep an eye on and maintain all the facilities that we utilize. So just wanted to provide those updates. I can take any questions.
How many people do you need for a kickball team? We're gonna
Do you need 7?
Yeah. We're gonna have a city council kickball team.
We can do it.
Yeah, we should.
We can do it. And registration is still open. We can do it.
Get us registered, David.
Speak for yourself, man.
$225. It's $225 a team, but the return on investment and fun is just.
How many people generally are on the team?
Honestly, I think that we're trying to get 12 or so. But I think we're open to whatever makes a team functional. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Laurel Park. I'm not certain where that is.
So I'm not sure if it's east up Laurel Ave, if it's Laurel Avenue. I mean, it's partway up the mountain. There's 2 beautiful fields. What road is that? It's not the one that goes up past the middle school. I think it's another one that you just drive up the mountain, and then all of a sudden there's two really, really nice fields up there. I'll look it up.
Second question, has there been any discussion at Raro to start dodgeball?
You know, we'd like to start flag football. Dodgeball has not yet come up, but I'll bring it up. Are you in?
I will absolutely join the dodgeball.
So East 21st Street is where Laurel Park is. And again, for someone personally who is loves athletic fields and opportunities for kids to play, they are really nice fields. And that if you haven't seen them, that Buena Vista has. And if you think back years ago, I think it's now been 6 or 7 years that since Buena Vista came back to Raro, that we brought them back into the fold. Maybe it's been 8 years, 7. When we brought Laurel Park back into our, repertoire of fields for softball and baseball, we really benefited from that because they're nice fields. So we thank BV for having them.
It's good to work with our partners. I don't have a threshold report. Do you, Nick? Any other questions about any of the reports that were given?
I do have one thing to mention about threshold.
Sure.
Just so I guess it's on people's radar. My understanding is there's going to be a meeting about homelessness on September 24th. I don't know if that's something that we want to bring up at the threshold meeting. I think it's at RARA, and I think they're inviting community stakeholders.
Yes, it's going to be from 6 to 7:30 about homelessness in this area. And it is on the first floor of the RARA building where we normally would go vote. So public is welcome to attend. And council will be getting invitations. Okay. I was not given a mayor's report. City manager report. Tom?
Thank you. Just a few items to highlight. We had tentatively scheduled the VMI master meter to be before you this evening. It's not quite ready. We think it will be ready on September 5th. Patrick Madigan, Director of Public Works, is working with Colonel Bubar. The Board of Visitors for VMI meets on September 17th. And so we hope to have that in front of you at your next meeting on September 5th. Next week on Thursday, the mounted board, the mounted unit board will meet, and my intention is to finish my research and make a decision to either go all in or discontinue that unit at that meeting. So if you have any additional feedback that you've heard from constituents, if there's any additional information that you wish for me to review prior to making that decision, I'd ask you to do that here in the next couple of days so that I have some time to review that before we meet with the mounted unit board on Thursday at 11:30 at the police department. Just wanted to point out two items internal to the organization with how we're handling some personnel matters. We have created an opportunity for an apprenticeship opportunity within the organization for internal training. Steve Polk is our building official, and he hasn't made any announcement about when he may retire, but he does know that date is not forever away. So he had recommended that we create an understudy or an apprenticeship program. And so that opportunity is currently being advertised within the organization. We think we have some interest from folks within both the fire department as well as in public works. And so that would be a great opportunity to have a couple of people explore whether they want to pursue those professional credentials. It does take a couple of years to get your certified building official. So wanted to thank Steve, Arnie, Robbie Bailey for their work to try and make that opportunity available. And I'll keep you apprised. Second, Lexington Fire Department recently did a recruitment for a firefighter paramedic to handle a vacancy that we have. And we had precisely 0 applications for that. It is a difficult credential to be a paramedic. It's much more common for people to have a firefighter EMT credential. So Chief Dickerson proposed and I approved hiring somebody who has the firefighter EMT certification with the expectation this was an existing part-time employee who was doing part-time work for us. And so we have decided that we will send her to paramedic training and make an investment, just as we do with police officers who are cadets before they get their certification or credential from the academy. Mr. Carroll was helpful in helping us revise an agreement. When we send an employee off to something like that, there's a commitment that they will make to us for at least 2 years because of the investment we're making in them. So I'm excited for that opportunity. It's important to point out that this is increasingly common in lots of different types of credentialed jobs, but it's also important because it can lead to a more attracting a more diverse candidate pool. So I think this is a good practice, and I wanted to thank Chief Dickerson for his work in bringing this forward. Ms. Alexander had mentioned how useful it is to jot things down on your calendar. So I'll just give you a couple things that you may want to consider putting on your calendar for after Labor Day. We're looking to have a work session, probably on an off council evening on either September 26th or October 10th to cover 2 topics. That would be the city's investment policy, which we gave you a little memorandum on that this evening, but would have a work session to drill down deeper into the information and how it relates to the debt policy, as well as the stormwater fees. As you may recall from July, we had proposed having some listening sessions in September and October after we have finished our review of the entire city and come up with a proposal for how the stormwater fee would be assessed so that we could have real interaction with any resident, any business owner, any institution, and to understand exactly what the proposed stormwater fee would mean for their particular property. So we're planning to do that either on the September 26th or October 10th, unless we decide to put it some other night, but that's what we're thinking. The fall joint meeting with the Lexington School Board is tentatively scheduled for October 17th. That would be a joint session, but it would be immediately before your regularly scheduled city council meeting on October 7th. So I would just ask you to pencil in 6 o'clock. And then, as I mentioned in the memorandum this evening regarding the Rockbridge Area Department of Social Services, I would ask you to pencil in a meeting for Thursday, December 12th, for possibly a joint meeting with Rockbridge Board of Supervisors and the City Council with Buena Vista. That's definitely a pencil in. That's too far away to put it in ink, but I just would ask you to have a placeholder for that. The last thing I wanted to share in my report is that the police camp was completed successfully last week. Over the 2 weeks, we had 77 young people from Lexington participate in that. So it's a remarkable growth from about 23 years ago to 77 youth participating in that camp in its 3rd year. Happy to answer any questions.
What do you know when there would be a decision between whether it's the 10th and the 26th?
I don't. We could do it right now. We could decide right now.
I would express a preference for the 10th. Yes. Yeah.
Duly noted. Yep.
Since it's a Thursday, if it could be 6:30 or later, I'd appreciate it. If not,
6:30 or later.
yeah, just because of the planning commission, but if not, I'll come to this late.
And we might suggest another night of the week if that Thursday is difficult for planning and ARB and other obligations.
Do you want to look at another date now?
What I might do is we'll do a doodle pool or something like that
Okay.
and find out what would work best that way rather than try and do it this evening.
Any other questions for the city manager? I just want to make a comment in regard to the creative ways that you're trying to fill positions. In regard to Steve Park's position, looking for an apprentice to work with him for a few years until his retirement, and also working on something over at the fire department. The school board tried to do something like this called a grow your own teacher. many years ago, and that didn't work. But we're trying to do that now with Irma Thompson program. So with manpower being such a problem, these days, we're having to think outside of the box to fill positions. So I appreciate that. Any other questions for city manager? Okay. City attorney's report.
I don't really have a report this evening, Madam Vice Mayor, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anyone have questions for Jeremy? Good. Everybody's staying out of trouble. Good thing. We do have some new business on the agenda, and it's regarding items that I would think our city manager would like to present. Items 15.1, 15.2, and 15.3.
Thank you. Only one of these items requires any action. Two of the items are more for your information purposes only, but we're happy to discuss them. Item 15.1 was a memorandum that Patricia Delaney, our treasurer, and Jennifer Bell, our finance director, and I worked together on to discuss how we're handling our investment strategy and our investment approach. The city has a very healthy treasury, and we view the treasury as the other side of the coin when we're talking about our debt management philosophy. These two should interrelate with how we plan our debt as we have large capital projects coming very near term, as well as how we both protect our principal as well as maintain our liquidity and maximize our yield on our investments from our treasury. Again, no specific action is needed on this. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If they're difficult, I would ask you to direct them to Ms. Bell because she's more of a subject matter expert than I am. And
I thought
again,
they were great. I appreciated having it all laid out for us to review.
In tier 2A and investing in ourselves, we talk a lot about infrastructure. Is there an opportunity somewhere in this where we're investing in ourselves in regard to human services?
So I think that's a separate topic. I mean, the answer is we should have that conversation. Absolutely. I think this is more on cash management and debt management. But I think if you wanted to have a budgetary conversation around human services of understanding social services within the community, agencies that support people, absolutely, we should have those conversations.
Any other comments? Okay, 15.2.
Thank you. This item, we are asking for a decision. If you choose not to take an action, that would be a decision to essentially decline this grant. But we had a work session recently where we were able to discuss the opportunity that the city has to hire a 19th police officer. This position would be a detective who would focus on domestic violence, sexual assault, and interpersonal crime. We presented to council at your work session information on the rise in this type of problem within our community, which is compelling. It's unfortunate and compelling for the need for this position. And we think this position will provide a great deal of additional benefit to the overall Lexington Police Department. It's a 2-year grant, which will cover everything except for basically the purchase of a police vehicle for this detective position. The expectation is that after the end of the 2-year grant period, that the city of Lexington would continue this 19th police officer position, though we have good reason to believe that there's an opportunity for us to get future funding for it, but we wouldn't want you to accept this grant opportunity with that promise and it goes unfulfilled. We did receive a letter of support from the Commonwealth's attorney, Jared Moon, in favor of this. His office is supportive of it, and they see a need for this type of additional police resource. We did answer through the staff memorandum some additional questions that were raised during the work session, and I'd be happy to respond to any more questions you may have. But I would recommend that we accept this grant and I would request a motion to do that this evening.
We have a recommendation from the city manager. What's your pleasure, council?
I'd make a motion to accept the DCJS grant to add a domestic violence, sexual assault, and crimes against children investigator to the LPD's detective division.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a couple of seconds. Is there any discussion?
I would just clarify the need for the vehicle, and if, will we be acquiring that within our budget or out of the budget, and where the 2 Tahoes that we have fit into it? Because the 2 Tahoes came when we only thought we were getting one or one vehicle.
We did, but then, so that brought the police department's fleet up to 22. And they have, they sold one, and another one that was about to go out of service, we were able to give to Rockbridge County. That was the Lexus that was acquired with,
Okay.
the
Okay.
drugs.
All right. So we need to acquire just one car, or are we needing to acquire 2 because we like to have a backup and we are currently down our backup?
Right, it would be 2,
So we need 2 police cars.
and only one is in the budget for this year.
Okay.
Okay.
This would be an addition to the budget and we'll come back with whatever approvals we need from you
Okay.
for the acquisition of that additional unbudgeted vehicle.
All right. Sounds good. I just wanted to clarify that just because talking about cars a lot and the Tahoes coming in and so on.
And that car is specifically for the person that's going to be in this position?
Yes, we are not buying a pursuit rated standard police vehicle. This would be we're gonna try and experiment if we can with a gently used electric vehicle, so that we can learn about that as we are preparing to electrify our fleet. And it doesn't have to be pursuit rated. So, this would be specific for the detective position that we would be adding if this grant is.
Other questions? Discussion? Are you ready for a vote? We need a roll call vote. Ms. Strong?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Sigler?
Aye.
Mr. Betts?
Aye.
Mr. Alligood?
Aye.
I vote aye, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who was involved in preparing this grant. 15.3.
Thank you. This item is just for information purposes only. This is 3 government entities are working together to build a new Department of Social Services building. Throughout the memorandum, I laid out the schedule, and it's the attempt is to manage the schedule very tightly because as you may know, the rent that DSS pays for the existing space in Lexington has gone up and is expected to continue to go up. So there's a sense of urgency to try and build this new facility and move DSS over to it in Buena Vista. The city of Lexington is the fiscal agent for this project. So we own the property in Buena Vista, and we will hold the contract for construction and project management. We will issue the debt. And so all 3 entities are working closely together for this. The funding formula has all been determined, how it's going to be paid for. So with this, we're just trying to keep council aware of what the schedule is, what we're trying to manage towards, and also to lay the groundwork that all 3 entities may need to meet jointly or separately sometime, say, between Thanksgiving and the end of the year holidays, so that all 3 can approve it. Otherwise, the goal of having a February of 2026 move-in date will be missed. So that no action is needed on this. This is just for information purposes only.
Any questions?
Do we receive any amount of fee for owning the property and essentially borrowing the money during construction? Because I know the agreement talked about we receive a 5% fiscal agent fee for the operating costs, but it says nothing about the debt
Correct.
and all of this work that, and owning it.
During the construction piece, we do not receive any fiscal agent fee. And as we go through and take on the debt and go through that process, Davenport will largely do the heavy lifting along with our bond counsel, Daniel Loro. So the city won't be doing a great deal of extra work.
And thank you. I agree with Ms. Bell, and just to add that the idea of having a project manager, a clerk of the works, is something that we would view as, we would be the entity that employs that individual or firm. And we would treat that as a project cost, and it would be rolled up into the indebtedness for the project.
Anyone else? We have a couple of pages of information here about the construction and of the building, so forth. So any comments from any of that? Okay. Well, we don't have any plans for a closed meeting tonight, Mr. Harwood. And the time is 8 o'clock and the meeting's adjourned.